Living in Mexico is really scary. You could get kidnapped. You could get robbed. You could be a victim of cartel violence. Now, I don't really believe that any of those are actually major threats to your well-being while living in Mexico, but there are 7 scary things about living in Mexico as an American that you should know about. Number 1 is that you could get stuck here without any money. Now, that is really scary. So what do you do about this? Number 1 is you have a debit card from your home that has no foreign transaction fees and has no ATM withdrawal fees. This will help it that you can go to any ATM in Mexico and only have to pay the surcharge that ATM charges you. And you'll usually get a pretty good exchange rate from dollar to peso as well. You can also consider using Zoom. It's a service of PayPal. I'll link down below to it, but it's an easy way to send money either to an OXXO, which is like a 7-Eleven, or to a supermarket, or to an Electra down here. Also, don't be afraid to get residency in Mexico before you move here, because having residency allows you to open up a bank account down here, and then it's really easy to get money in Mexico, and you don't have to worry about running out. The second scary thing about living in Mexico is when you don't know how to speak Spanish. Yes, that can be a little bit scary, but even consider that if you do know Spanish, it can still be a little bit scary. And that's because the Spanish that you learned might not be the Spanish that they actually speak down here, and so you're still going to struggle, and that can create a little bit of fear and anxiety. So, for example, you might have learned how to speak Spanish in high school in the United States, but they didn't teach you the new phrases that the kids are coming up with these days. They didn't teach you the proper pronunciations of certain words because your teacher in high school wasn't a native Spanish speaker, so they taught you incorrectly. Also, you might just find that even if you're good at Spanish, you're going to end up talking to more than one person at a time, or talking to people who speak really quickly, or having to make a phone call in Spanish. And all of this can be a little bit fear-inducing because it's not easy, even if you think you're good at Spanish. The third scary thing about living in Mexico is that the cops here might just rustle you up. You know, it's not uncommon that if you're driving around as a foreigner and you pass a police checkpoint, that they might just pull you over to the side just to see what you're doing, start asking you questions in Spanish, just to give you a little bit of fear. You know, they might even speak English, but they'll still come up to you in Spanish and try to put a little bit of fear in your bones. Now, why is it a little bit scary? You know, not just because you're dealing with the cops, but also the police here generally have fully automatic weapons hanging around their necks. It's not just like in the United States where they just have a Glock on their hip. They have a huge machine gun that they're walking up to you with. That's a little bit intimidating. The fourth scary thing about living in Mexico is some of the aggressive dogs that live here. Now, even some of the dogs that have owners, they don't have chains on, they don't have collars on, they're just protecting their house like guard dogs, and if they don't know you and recognize you, man, will those dogs just give you a hollering and possibly even chase you down the street. That's kind of scary. And that doesn't even say anything about the street dogs that live around here. They sometimes roam in packs. You know, they got crazy looking eyes. It looks like they've just been eating garbage the whole time, so they just stare at you like this. A little bit scary. The fifth scary thing about living in Mexico is that sometimes the power or the internet might go out. Super scary, right? Yeah, it's not that scary, but say you actually run a business, or you're working online, or you're just really connected with the people back home and you want to keep phone calls going with them, you know, through FaceTime or something like that. Well, it can be a little scary when, say, the power goes out and you're in the middle of an important business meeting, or say you're working online and the internet goes out and you really have a deadline that you need to meet today. This can be a little bit scary, obviously because it's a threat to your money. And now that can be a little bit fear-inducing, a little bit anxiety-inducing, but I just want to let you know that even if the power goes out, even if the internet goes out, it usually comes back fairly quickly. Now, living in Mexico, it's a huge country. There's a lot of different places. You know, some places have really high-quality infrastructure, other places not so much. So you might find a place where the power is always on, the internet's always on, or you might end up living in a place where you could lose the power for half the day. You could lose the internet for 8 hours at a time, and that can be a little bit scary if you have your own business. But also just imagine you have an electrical induction stove and you're trying to cook dinner and you're halfway through and the meat's not all the way fully cooked, and then the power goes out and you're just stuck there with half-cooked food and nothing to eat, and you're hungry, and there's no power, and there's no air conditioning, and now you're stuck. That's a little bit disconcerting. But I found that if you know that these things can happen, that you know the power can go out, you know the internet can disappear, then you're a little bit more prepared for it, and you're not so worried when it does happen. The sixth scary thing about living in Mexico as an American is that you might not have any friends or family around you. You know, most of your friends and family might live back home. Thankfully, it's a really close flight to get back to the United States or Canada from Mexico, so that might not be a huge deal, but it can also just take a lot of time to actually make new friends down in Mexico and actually adjust to living down here, especially if you're trying to make friends with the locals. When it comes to the foreigners, for example, you might just make friends who are highly transient. You know, a lot of people might just be coming for a few months, or maybe you're living here for years and they're just here for 6 months. It can be really tough to make friends while you're here and then have to see them go. It can even be a little bit scary, I would say, to not have a really solid unit of friends and family around you all the time. That's one big thing about being a traveler or living in another country. And the seventh thing that's really scary about living in Mexico is all the things that you've been told are scary about living in Mexico, but actually aren't scary about living here. Firstly, it's really scary if you don't poke that like button so this video can reach more people. I appreciate that. I've also heard people say that the healthcare services in here are something to worry about. They're really not. They have public healthcare. They have private healthcare. In fact, there's a lot of people who will fly down to Mexico specifically just to get their dental work done here because it's so much less expensive than what it is back home. I've also heard about the gang and the cartel violence that's all over Mexico. And even though I've been all over Mexico, I've never, ever seen it. It's not that scary. Same thing about getting robbed or kidnapped. I've just never felt like that's something that's actually going to happen. I think that's something that happens on TV. It happens on the news. It's designed to scare you, and that's what it does, but it's just not something that actually happens. And okay, yes, I understand. Some people do get robbed. They get their homes broken into. Some people do get kidnapped, and bad things happen. But generally speaking, these fears of living in Mexico are often unfounded. I've heard a lot of people also say that it's scary to live in Mexico because you might get food poisoning or you might drink bad water or something like that. And I can tell you from experience, yeah, that sucks a lot when you get that stuff because it really makes you feel like you're going to die. On the idea of drinking the water down here, I would not recommend drinking the water. It's not going to be good for you. Just get fresh water and you can avoid any kind of tummy bugs that way. So I've also heard from American media that the people in Mexico are really scary and that we need to be frightened of them coming into our country. So that would kind of give you the idea that going to Mexico should be scary too, right? Well, it's not further from the truth. I can tell you from personal experience that most Mexicans are really nice and they're more than willing to go out of their way to help you if you need something. So don't be afraid to move to Mexico, and if you want to know 3 easy ways to do so, just click this video right here or check out this video over here for some tips on how to live in Mexico.